Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul. Now, At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul is a horror film that was released in Brazil in 1964, and this is the first movie to feature the character of Coffin Joe. Now, Coffin Joe, they don't actually call the character that in the movie, but the character is now referred to as Coffin Joe. The character's real name is something that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce because I know I'm gonna butcher it if I try to say the character's real name, so we're just gonna refer to the character as Coffin Joe. Now, the character of Coffin Joe really has become a very iconic character in Brazil as well as all over the world. Now, this was actually Brazil's first horror movie, and this was actually pretty controversial when it came out in Brazil. Like, it was actually banned in a lot of parts of the country at the time. Now, the plot of At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul is, it's about this evil mortician who lives in this small town that's a very religious community, and this character, he absolutely hates religion. Like, he considers religion to be comfort for the weak, and he constantly mocks the people who live in this town because of their religion, but he's also a scumbag piece of shit, really, because he constantly bullies the people who live in this town, and he really is just a bad guy. But he believes that the only thing a person can do is continue their legacy, so he wants nothing more than to have a son who can continue his legacy. But in the beginning of the movie, he has a wife, and his wife can't bear children, so he hates and resents her because of this, and he ends up killing her at one point, and throughout the movie, he's trying to find the perfect woman to bear his child. And there's a certain point in the movie where he runs into this gypsy, and the gypsy tells him that his soul is damned to hell. Like, basically, he's going to pay for all the crimes and sins that he committed. And I really don't want to give too much else away about the movie, but the character, as I said, he's an atheist, so he doesn't believe in God or the devil or ghosts or anything like that, but there is supernatural stuff happening in the movie, at least towards the end, but you don't know if it's really supernatural or if it's just in this character's head, but I don't want to give too much else away about what happens at the end, though. Now, I love At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul. This movie, in my opinion, is a horror classic, and for a movie that came out in 1964, the film is actually pretty violent. Like, there's a scene in this movie where the main character, Coffin Joe, actually claws this guy's eyes out, and there's also a scene in this movie where he rapes a woman. Like, this movie is pretty violent for its time, and I actually think this movie was years ahead of its time, and I could see why at this time this movie was pretty controversial when it came out, at least in Brazil. I don't know if this movie ever got a release here in the United States at this time, but I know it was pretty controversial in Brazil when it came out. Another thing that I really find cool about this movie is the fact that this main character is a scumbag piece of shit, yet he's the lead character. He's pretty much the protagonist of the movie, even though he's also the antagonist, and I know now you see a lot of movies where the villain is also the main character, but back in 1964, I can't really think of another movie that came out around this time where the main villain of the movie is also the lead character. At least not in the United States. Maybe in Brazil there were a lot of movies like that in Brazil at this time, but in the United States, I can hardly think of a movie that came out where the villain is also the protagonist. But yeah, I absolutely love At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul. I think this movie is fucking awesome. Like, this really is a very good horror film, and for a movie that came out in the 1960s, it's actually pretty violent and pretty fucked up, and it's also a pretty creepy movie as well, mainly because of the main character. The character of Coffin Joe, he's one of the most disturbing horror movie villains out there, in my opinion, but he's also a very interesting character as well, and there's this great sequence in the movie where the character goes on this like 8-minute long rant about how there's no God and no afterlife, and he's screaming out like he's actually kind of begging the spirits of the dead to take him to hell to prove to him that there is an afterlife, and it's a great sequence in the movie, and apparently the whole sequence was actually improv'd, and it's really, really good. And the guy who plays Coffin Joe in the movie is the same guy who also directed the movie as well. Now, the whole movie is in Portuguese with English subtitles, so as long as you don't mind reading subtitles, I definitely recommend this movie. Now, this movie spawned a sequel in 1967 called This Night I'll Possess Your Corpse, and then there was another film called Awakening of the Beast, which also featured the character of Coffin Joe. However, that movie was not set in the same continuity as the first two movies, but for years that movie has been considered to be the third film of the Coffin Joe trilogy, but the character of Coffin Joe, I believe, has shown up in a lot of other movies as well that weren't set in the same continuity as those first two movies, but in 2008 there was a film called Embodiment of Evil, which was actually set in the same continuity as the first two movies, so now that movie is considered to be the official third film of the Coffin Joe trilogy. But yeah, that's my review on At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul, and bye.